I've been on this earth for about 23 years. I've been playing games for roughly 15 of them, and I've never played any form of Final Fantasy game in my life. Legitimately never. Up until this point. But I intend to fix that. With Final Fantasy 16 coming to PC, it pretty much means that almost every single Final Fantasy game except for Rebirth, but that will probably change in the next year, is now available on Steam. And I thought, what better time than now to finally start getting into them and getting into the entire franchise. And I'm going to do one better. These videos aren't just going to be simple playthroughs. No. I'm going to 100% every single one of them to the best of my abilities. There might be some things in the later games that cause issues with that goal, but we'll see how we go. All of my playthroughs are going to be streamed live over on my Twitch channel, so if you want to catch any of these live, then go check that out in the link down below. And if you want to see the original playthrough of Final Fantasy, then check out the players link in the description where you see all my original VODs. But without further ado, let's get into my playthrough of Final Fantasy. Starting off with the most important thing of a playthrough, what classes did I use in this game? Well, we stuck with the typical warrior, thief, white mage, and black mage with their suggested names, purely because I didn't realize that you could actually, change classes. My brain never really took the moment to actually, see if you could swap classes or anything. I just assumed that that's what you had to deal with, and I just went with it. After a lot of juxtaposition, effectively telling us the state of the world, that it's all gone to crap and everything is dying and we're waiting for the prophecy to be fulfilled of the 4 warriors of light to appear and fix everything for us. And well, it so happens that you are the 4 warriors of light. So you get dropped in the middle of Cornelia and we head to the castle logically. We meet the local king who discovers our 4 crystals of light, but before he's willing to believe that we are those prophesized warriors, he gives us a small task to save his daughter, the princess, who's been abducted by Garland, a knight that was deemed to be the strongest under his majesty's service. After exploring the town, I head out and start heading up towards the Chaos Shrine, which is supposedly where Garland and the princess currently are. After I enter the Chaos Shrine, after a little bit of a walk, I get an encounter with 7 wolves, and obviously being this early in the game, this encounter, after almost taking them all out, meant certain death and a restart from the previous save. Whoopsies. Yeah, that makes about sense. I then spent some time grinding in the local areas, eventually buying some upgrades like some new weapons and some armor, and then I head back to the Chaos Shrine to actually make an attempt on Garland. I then handily defeat Garland and then escort the princess back to the king, who gives us now the full prophecy of the 4 crystals. The Princess Sarah gives us her loot, which will only be useful way in the late game, and the bridge gets put back together, so we continue heading up north. My pair of mages get their asses handed to them by a pair of wild horses, and I spend an embarrassing amount of time trying to figure out how to revive them because the game never explicitly tells you exactly how to do that outside of the $500 Phoenix Down item. And if you want to know, there's churches in most towns. There are unmarked buildings that you go into and you can revive your characters for a few pennies. Oh my god, I figured it out. Okay, I suppose that's how that works. That is intriguing. With that problem solved, we finally approach the bridge where we get a bit more juxtaposition telling us about how our quest has begun. After a bit of traveling, we come across Maitoya's cave, whom used to have a crystal eye but had since had it stolen, which we now need to gain in order to have him help us in the future. But that is a future question. We go back to exploring to find the next town. After a lot of random encounters, I finally make it to the next town, which has been taken over by pirates. So after encountering them in one of the corners, I swiftly deal with them, and the other guy remaining decides to go, hey, I don't actually want any trouble. Look, I'm reformed now. Here, have my ship. Whilst talking to the random villagers in town, one of them tells me about the elves that live across the sea and the problems they currently face with their prince being destined to an eternal slumber. After making some upgrades in this town, I partway discover how magic works. Partway. I'm still not quite there yet. It'll take me a while to fully understand the magic system of this game, even though it's very simple. I also quickly discover the fun that is poison in this game. And the fact that you can't just simply get rid of it by sleeping it all. Unfortunately, you'll still keep the poison. You need to go get some antidote or something else that gets rid of poison, which is definitely going to lead to some frustrations for the early game. I eventually would finally hop onto my ship and start exploring the seas. Encountering battle after battle, I would eventually make my way to Mount Duggar, where I find the gnomes, dwarves, I'm not 100% sure. They look like gnomes though, and discover that they're waiting for some form of high-powered explosive in order to blow open a canal. Unfortunately, due to lack of information, I continue my exploration. After more exploration and a lot of battles, I finally come across Elfhelm, or the areas where the elves live, and discover their castle and town. I then quickly discover that the curse has been put onto the prince where he permanently is asleep was done by Astos, the dark elf who has ran away up to a random location that we don't know of as of yet. After gaining a bit more information from the elves, I go back to exploring the lands and finally discover the fun of magic by burning all the wolves in one quick succession. Bow, bow, bow. I would then come across the Western Keep, which was a ruined castle that currently still has a king sitting in the throne room, who apparently was tricked by Estos by the king of the Dark Elves, and now his castle has fallen into ruin. He makes a request for us to get the crown from the Marsh Flats because he's too scared to go in there and do it himself. So guess what we're doing next? After some more exploring, I finally come across the Marsh Cave, the first of the many dungeons that I'm going to explore in this game. My first expedition into the Marsh Cave was very interesting. After heading up to the north section of the first floor, heading down to the second floor from the north entrance, I explored a little bit, opened up some chests, and then started coming across poison, everyone's favorite pain and suffering. After my warrior succumbed to the poison, I started heading back to Elfhelm to try and heal. On my way there, my white mage was taken out by a pack of ogres. After reviving and healing everybody, resupplying and also purchasing some upgrades since I gathered a fair bit of gold from my first exploration, I head right back to the caves. My second expedition didn't really go that much better, aside from the fact that I brute forced my way down to the third floor via the southern exit and started actually opening up a bunch of chests. But ultimately, after both my warrior and thief had finally died from their poison injuries because I haven't been smart enough to get antidotes for some dumb reason, I head back to Elfhelm, which is when my white mage also dies and my dark mage is sitting at 1 HP. What a close call that one was. After healing and resupplying, I head right back into the Marsh Caves again. After heading down to the third floor, I come across a chest that has 4 Piscomons inside of it, and fight them, struggling very much. This also so happens to be the chest that contains the crown that we've been looking for inside of the caves. I of course take this straight to the Western Keep, not really thinking about the fact that this might bleed into a potential fight, who knows. I've taken a pretty big beating on my way there. I've got 1 unit down and I go in and take the crown to him, to only discover that it's Astos, the Dark Elf, who wanted the crown because it can help him do things. Isn't that great timing? And because I haven't done what I need to do to actually, I don't know, prep for any form of potential boss fight, I get my ass quickly handed to me. If I had have known this, I would have bothered to revive my dead mage. Wow, that's great. Why do you keep using dark? Just kill my man already. Oh, there it is. Even if I healed, it wouldn't have mattered. Man just went deaf. The party was defeated. Man, who would have guessed? Anyways, after going back to my last save, I head back to Elfhelm, do some restocking. I go to various different towns to actually collect some magic spells because I hadn't done that yet, and I've only recently really picked up on how that magic stuff worked at this point. And then I finally head back to the Western Keep and hand Astor's ass to him instead. Or not, you won't get that opportunity, I suppose. We still won, baby! Not great because Hubert and Laris are down, so they don't get the XP here, but I don't care. When defeated, Astos drops the crystal eye that he stole from Mytoya, which we quickly take back to her, and she gives us a Jolt Tonic as a reward for this quest. You know where this one's going? We're going back to the Elf Prince, who we give the Jolt Tonic, who wakes up and then hands us the Mystic Key, which is the key that allows us a bunch of locked rooms in the areas that we've already been so far. One of them, in Cornelia Castle, actually contains the nitro powder which the dwarves need to blow up the canal wide open. It's funny how a lot of things just line up in that quick succession once you get far enough in. I do get destroyed several times over when I'm trying to unlock the final doors in the Marsh Caves, but I eventually just give up and start moving on to actually giving the nitro powder to the dwarves. With the nitro, they blow the caves wide open, making a new canal on the surface that allows the boat to finally go through outside of the inner ocean area to explore the rest of the world. After following the coastline for a while in various different battles, we come across Melmond, a very ran-down, decrepit town area that's been ruined because of the earth crystals being fed off of by one of the fiends. And ultimately we get made the request and please save us type deal. Also, fun fact, there is no form of church in this town, nor is there any form of shops for general supplies, so you better hope you restocked at the previous towns that you were at, or goodbye, I suppose. After exploring this new land for a little bit, I come across the Giant's Cave. When we walk up to him, he pulls a Gandalf on us and tells us that we shall not pass. Well, that's funky. I wonder how we solve this problem. I leave the cave and continue to do some more exploring. Not long after, I come across the Cavern of Earth, which is the next major dungeon in this game. Unfortunately for me, I quickly lose my white mage to the Earth Elemental, which is kind of the worst one to be taken out because I still don't have any Phoenix Downs on me, and I, for some reason, still don't have many antidotes, and I was kind of relying on my white mage to cover both of those aspects. But that's the thing that's currently down, so I head back to Melmond to quickly discover that there is no church, nor is there any shop for supplies. So now I have to do the fun, long trip whilst two of my units have poison, the other one is dead, all the way back to Cornelia because that's the closest town to get to on a straightaway to actually get some items to do some healing. After healing and collecting a bunch of supplies, I decide that rather than go right back into the cavern, I will explore a little bit more, heading over to Cresset Lake eventually, which was quite interesting because that's a lot of exploration, and for anyone who knows the progression of this game, you also know that, hey, isn't it a bit early to be doing that, but don't worry about it. After doing a lot more exploring and quickly discovering that, well, the Cavern of Earth is clearly the next thing that I'm meant to be doing because there's nothing really else to find at this point in time, I head back to the caverns, this time far more equipped and supplied than I was before, as well as having a bunch of extra levels under my belt because of the sheer amount of combat I dealt with whilst exploring. This session in the Earth Caverns was far more successfully grinding my way through both floor 1, 2, and 3, collecting most of the chests along the way. For some reason I didn't grab them all, even though it's a part of one of the achievements that I'm going to inevitably collect. I don't know, we've got to ask the past me to figure out what was the choices in that one. I'd eventually make it to the room where the vampire is hidden. After handily wiping the floor with him, we collect the star ruby from a chest and see the stone slab in the area behind the vampire's room. Unfortunately, that's all we can do here for now, so we head back up to the surface. After collecting the star ruby, I decided to check out the Giant's Cave again, just to see if this key item would be useful in any way, and it turns out that it is. The giant decides to eat the thing and gets out of my way. We then grab the chest in the Giant Cave and head out the other side, which we then do some more exploring, fight some enemies, and head our way into the Sage's Cave, where we see Sata, the Sage, who notices that, hey, you're the one who defeated the vampire. Good job, kid. Here, have a staff that can help you get further into the dungeon. Of course, we now go and head back. We head back into the Caverns of the Earth, and yes, I did not make a trip back to Melbourne to actually do any form of healing. I just went straight back into the dungeons. We make it down to level 3, where we come across the stone slab again that the Sage's staff opens up. We continue crawling through the next 2 levels of the dungeon, collecting most of the chests along the way. Again, don't know why I didn't collect them all. They just become a problem for me later for some dumb reason. But hey, I'm not going to complain too much. And we make our way to the first crystal with the first fiend, the Lich. This battle wasn't exactly too difficult considering we have 3 main sources of damage here. The technique that I've built up with battling these bosses at this point is that I'll give both my warrior and thief haste and temper, increasing their damage, increasing the amount of swings they do at the same time, and then also my white mage is able to do undead damage because the Lich is an undead mob. Ultimately, I very quickly, handily take down the Lich and we free the crystal. Oh flip, I didn't deer instead of... That's okay. Man did 500 damage with that haste. Oh god. That's cool. Done. Again. After teleporting out of the dungeon, we head back to Maliod, which is we grabs a bunch more upgrades that I hadn't quite gotten from this town yet. Also do some healing, and then we head over to the Cresset Lake, which again, we buy more supplies, buy some more upgrades, because we got so much gold from that various amounts of dungeon crawling, and we talk to the 12 sages, who tell us the story of what's currently going on, and lets us know that, hey, because the Earth Fiend is dead now, the Fire Fiend has woken up in the volcano nearby. Here, have a canoe. This is how you're going to get there. Good luck. With the canoe, we're now able to start traveling through the rivers on the interior of all these continents, which fortunately, or unfortunately, depending on how you feel it, the next fiend is right next door to us in amongst the maze of rivers that is this continent here over at Mount Glog. We head into the Mount Glog itself, and well, guess what? It's a volcano. It's fire. It's hot. There's lava everywhere that for some reason we can walk on and it barely burns. As I crawl through the dungeons, I actually make the concerted effort to go for every single chest that is on every single floor, so I don't ever actually have to come back to this dungeon, and all the chests for here will be completely done. This does make the dungeon crawling go from probably what could have been like a 20-30 minutes affair to very long, just slow crawling, because you're not only encountering a lot of random encounters, every second chest usually has a pair of fire elementals hiding inside of it, making it take even longer. But with the massive supply of items I've made sure to gather this time around, I'm honestly mostly okay. After the long arduous grind that was getting every single chest inside of Mount Glug, we finally make it down to the fire crystal where we find the fire feed waiting for us to show up. And because of the sheer amount of time we've spent grinding in this dungeon, leveling up, Marlith got her ass very quickly handed to her. As we annihilate her with the loss of Laris again, rest in peace my boy, we'd annihilate her and free the fire crystal. And of course, right after Laris dies, as is tradition at this point, the boss dies. Man can't catch a break, he never gets that sweet, sweet XP from the bosses. After teleporting out of Mount Glug, we head back to Cresset Lake to do some healing, to get some new supplies, and do some last upgrades that I still can do, overall restocking myself for the next trip. I will then spend a good chunk of time sailing around the northern end of the map, which I've come to quickly realize that, there isn't any form of dock around this area. If I'd only remembered the message I got in the second town a very long time ago, letting me know that, hey, there are no docks in the north and you kind of need one to do your ship. But eventually I pick up on the fact that, hey, there's a bunch of rivers I didn't explore in that second area that's near the volcano that I should probably go take a look at, because there might be something there that I kind of need. After running through the river maze again, I come across the Cavern of Ice, another dungeon that is set to be explored. Repeating what I did in Mount Glug, I take the effort to collect every single chest inside of the caverns, and ultimately collect the Levy Stone, a next key item that's going to be very important for unearthing a certain thing a little later. After collecting everything, I finally leave the ice caverns and I just leave the river area, going to the small little desert in the bottom of the island, because I totally didn't look up a guide at this point, being very confused on what's currently happening next, where I unearth the airship. And after flying around for a bit, trying to drop in various different locations, I finally end up going to Gaia. After buying all the upgrades I can and discovering this weird lake that's up the back here, I end up leaving and doing some more exploration with the airship, just roaming around the map for a good while until I eventually decide to stop at this weird abandoned castle thing, which turns out to be the Citadel of Trials. After rolling through the teleportation maze and then rolling through the next level where we have a bunch of mobs to fight, I eventually gained the Rat's Tail and smashed the two white dragons that are waiting at the end for me. After leaving the Citadel Trials, I go to the west a little bit, where I discover a network of caves, which turns out to be the Dragon Caves. Lucky for me, the first one I went into so happens to be the main one, where we come across Bahamut, which recognizes our bravery and gives us the upgraded class for all 4 characters. Upgrading my units into a Knight, a Ninja, White Wizard, and a Black Wizard respectively. I would then just explore the rest of the Dragon Caves, collecting all the chests that there were there along the way. After a lot of exploration, I would end up accidentally coming across a caravan in the northwestern desert, which so happens to be selling a bottled fairy for around 40,000 gold. After buying this, I decided to head back to Gia, because one of the villagers mentioned earlier that, hey, if you have a fairy, they can get this special substance from the bottom of the lake, or something along those lines. And when I head back there, the fairy immediately jumps out of the bottle, thanks me and gives me some Oxyel for my troubles, which for those who don't know, this allows me to be able to breathe underwater. And guess what's next? Oh yeah, there so happens to be the Water Fiend, which probably is underwater, probably because I don't know yet. I eventually find a way to get into the town of Lefenia, but unfortunately I can't do anything here because I don't understand their language as of yet, so I go back to exploring, finding another town. After entering the town of Onrak, I quickly discover a pier that seems to have a submarine and a person waiting over there. When I get over there, this person, who seems to be a mermaid, asks for me to help them down under because I have the ability to breathe underwater now, and then quickly fades away. Using the submarine, we head down into the Sunken Shrine, an underwater shrine that is usually the home of the mermaids, but unfortunately has been mostly taken over by monsters thanks to the water fiend feeding on the water crystal down below. I end up making some quick work of this dungeon, getting through all the levels within about 20 minutes, whilst also collecting every single chest of the area, and also talking to most of the mermaids on the upper levels. I'll eventually make my way down to the water crystal where we find the water fiend, aka the Kraken, what is supposedly meant to be the hardest fiend of the lot, but again, I make very quick work of this fiend, freeing the water crystal once again. Oh my god, 900 damage, whoa, and Laris actually lived this time round. The tradition has been broken. After leaving the water shrine and healing up, I leave town and head up the river that's nearby, going up towards the waterfall, because you know, a common thing in games is there's a cave in the waterfall, and what do you know, that pattern occurs here with the waterfall cavern. This is a mini dungeon type thing, it's just one layer, you go all the way to the end, there's a robot waiting at the end there to give you a warp cube, as well as 6 different chests. So I do that, collect the items, and then move on. After leaving the caverns, I head back over to Cornelia in order to do some restocking, to do some healing, as well as to plan my next actions, which is to collect the remaining chests over at the Chaos Shrine and my Toya's Cave that I hadn't collected before. Unfortunately, there's only a few chests on the surface, the rest of the ones in the Chaos Shrine will come at a later date. I collect the ones over at my Toya's house. I then head over to Mellor, where we come across Uni, who sees the Rosetta Stone that we currently have, which apparently makes it possible to learn Lavenian, which he then learns himself, deciphers it, and decides to express his gratitude by teaching us that language as well. I then head back to Lavenia now that I can finally speak these people and learn their plight. They used to live up in the skies about 400 years ago, but the fiend that took over the Wind Crystal kicked them out of their flying fortress and sent them to the ground. This is now 400 years later. These guys have been trying to find out if they can make it back up there. One of the guys I end up talking to gives me a chime, which allows me to access the Mirage Tower in the middle of the large desert, which is necessary in order to make it to the flying fortress. I'll then head over to the Mirage Tower, which we'll start exploring in the same way we've done pretty much every other dungeon up to this point, clearing the floor of every single chest that there is available before heading on to the next floor. Eventually we'd make it to the top of the Mirage Tower, where we come across a teleporter that, with the use of the Warp Cube, allows us to access the Flying Fortress, the next major dungeon. We then rinse and repeat the same process as before, collecting every single chest before moving on to the next floor. Eventually I would come across an observation window. When looking down, I see the mist from the 4 forces of the crystals all converging into a single point above the Chaos Shrine. Totally not foreshadowing for what's going to be happening a little later. I'd eventually make it to the top floor, where we'd find the Wind Crystal and the Wind Fiend, Tiamat, who again I made quick work of, because at this point I've gotten to the point where I've got my strategy down pack and is honestly doing pretty well at dealing with most of the boss mobs so far. Ah, damn it. I was hoping to get Morgan back up before the boss went down, but no, not our luck today. After freeing the Wind Crystal and teleporting out of the Flying Fortress down to the base of the Mirage Tower, I head over to the Cresset Lake to talk to the 12 stages again, as they did ask for me to come back once I'd freed all the crystals. They then tell me about the plight of the world, the fact that they've been trapped in a 2,000-year cycle, where someone goes back to the past and sends the fiends into the future, causing this destruction that we've just tried to undo, and the way to go back is to head to the Chaos Shrine. It was at this point, before heading to the final boss, that I decided to do some busy work, collecting all of the remaining chests that I have around the world that I just failed to collect in the early game. Unfortunately, I failed to find 3 of the ones from the Cavern of Earth, and I just couldn't figure out where that room was for some reason. I don't know, I'm just stupid sometimes. And I'd also head back to my ship to do the 15-piece puzzle, or at least open it, because that's an achievement. I didn't bother actually trying it out, because quite frankly, I didn't care enough. But after doing all that busy work, restocking on supplies, I finally head to the Chaos Shrine, which we can finally use the loot in order to open up the seal and go back in time 2,000 years into the past. This is the final dungeon of the game, and of course by far the largest, with countless chests scattered all over the place, and as you go up the first remaining floors in order to start descending down the floors, where you encounter every single fiend that you've beaten before you, eventually collecting most of the chests because I somehow missed one again. I don't know how I do this, I am just bad at this for some reason. I'd eventually make it down to the bottom floors, where we go into the room and encounter Garland, this time 2,000 years in the past. past, because apparently when we kill him originally at the start of this game, he, instead of dying, gets saved by the 4 fiends and gets pulled back in time. He then would help them go back in forward in time in order to start salvaging on the crystals to making this 2,000-year cycle continue and rinse and repeat. As the 4 Warriors of Light, is up to us to end him here and now and end this cycle that continues on to this day. We then fight Chaos. Now, I just want to make this clear, this is a ginormous difficulty spike when compared to quite literally everything else in the game up to this point. Because he goes from a boss that has like 1,000 of health, like I believe most of the fiends in the Chaos Shrine have like somewhere between 2,000 to 5,000 health apiece. I haven't looked up the pure stats, it's just what it feels like. Whilst Chaos has 20,000 HP points, and also has a variety of different attacks that happens at pure random. There is no attack pattern, you just gotta pray for the best RNG to not get absolutely lambasted by him, because if he hastes, his melee can just one-shot a majority of units, or almost one-shot, which isn't exactly the greatest position to be in. Furthermore to that, he can randomly heal himself at 9,999 health, which is not great, especially considering you'll probably burn through a lot of your resources to get him down to that point before he just randomly heals. So the first attempt, I got shafted because, well, I didn't know what I was expecting. I didn't properly heal or resource manage anything before this because, you know, I didn't know what to expect. I was expecting another boss similar to the previous ones. The second time round, I end up getting super unlucky after he knocks out my mage, which has my full heal, which is very useful for every other thing when it gets put down. Phoenix Down only puts you back to 1 health. He then heals himself to full again, and then not long later, after burning more of my resources, he heals himself again, which at that point I just kind of didn't bother for the rest of that fight and let him take me out. The third attempt didn't go any better, just ended up in the same place as before, failing. Same with the fourth one, and at this point I was extraordinarily frustrated and was only going to give it one more shot at this point in time, which is the 5th attempt. I'm sure you can see by my reaction here how frustrated and everything else that was building up to this point because of this fight. What? Oh, fuck. Fuck. Oh. God. Oh, far out. Anyway, with the final nail in Chaos's coffin, this ends the time loop, finally freeing the world from this loop of disaster and ruin that has been fallen into for a long period of time. Ultimately, the deeds of what happened here from the 4 Warriors of Light will never be remembered because, well, it was a time warp that ended up causing this all in the first place, and by fixing something in the past, it never actually happened. Now at this point, in order to 100% the game, I now need to get my party to level 50, they're currently 47 at this point in time, collect the final 4 chests that I missed, the 3 in the Caverns of Earth, and then the 1 in Chaos Shrine, and complete the 3 beast re-entries. 2 of them are pretty easy, it's one of the dinosaurs from the Great Desert, and then one of the flying sphinx things inside of the Chaos Shrine that I just didn't come across. But then the more annoying one is the war mech that we have that appears only at the bridge before Tiamat in the Flying Fortress at about 1 or 3 in 64 chance, about a 3% chance to encounter it on that bridge. After collecting the 3 final chests from the Caverns of the Earth, finding that weird room, and heading over to the Great Desert where I come across the dinosaur I was missing, heading up to the Flying Fortress and to the final level where I just went back and forth for a while. Eventually this would be the point where I get up to level 50 with all my units, getting that achievement out of the way, but again it would take a while before I finally come across the War Mech, which we made very quick work of because at this point I've suffered under Chaos and I'm closing in on level 60 at this point, so it wasn't too difficult. I then head over to the Chaos Shrine, I'll come across the last thing for the bestiary, completing that achievement, and then I'll find that one missing chest that I just completely missed earlier, finally 100%ing the game. And so that was my journey with Final Fantasy. What do you think? Overall, I love the game for the most part. There were certain pain points, but ultimately I see it as some of the things that have just not aged that well, considering this is a game made in the late 80s, early 90s from memory. It's just one of those things where overall it was a good game, and I can see why it was a major stepping stone for this style of game back on the NES. Next up is Final Fantasy 2 in probably a few months, considering that Metaphor ReFantazio is going to be getting in the way first, and I kind of want to play it that first. But hey, either way, make sure to like button down below, make sure to subscribe if you enjoyed, but until next time, bye bye.